The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the member for Petrie.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, to be returned for a second time representing the people of Petrie is humbling to say the very least. I'd like to begin by offering them my most sincere thanks and to say I'll not let you down. I love the electorate of Petrie, it's my home. I feel extremely grateful for a childhood spent outside the borders of the Big Smoke. Days were carefree and saw me traversing between the boundaries of what would become the electorate I now represent. I know it's the demography like the back of my hand. If you've never visited, of course, Petrie, I encourage you to do so. I think you're actually coming up soon, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is rich with natural wonder and thick with community spirit. When the people of Petrie elected me once and then twice, I made the same commitment to myself that I had done to them then. I'll give all that I have to represent the best interests of the only community that I really know, and I'll really work hard and will continue to work hard for the people of Petrie. With all due respect, I'm not here to mix it with you. I have said previously, and I'll say it again, with the greatest respect to each one of us here today, I'd rather be home in my electorate than knocking around the walls of Parliament House. If I could, of course, each time I come to Canberra and jump on a plane, I'd bring them all with me to show them around and to show them what we do here and how I represent them here. Petrie is a community of diverse interests and goals. It is important to me that we all have our say. And unfortunately, there's not room for everyone here in the chamber, but I do my very best to get out and talk to people through mobile offices and on the ground at different community meetings, and listening to what people are saying is important to them. So I guess while they man the fort, I join you as an electoral bugle of sorts to highlight the needs of each person like me that calls Petrie home. I bring my voice and each one of theirs to the seat of decision-making with one single goal, that being to work together to see that the communities of Petrie continue to grow and to become the best they can be. So today I have with me the concerns of the people of Petrie, and I'd like to raise them with you. They tell me the issues that sit at the top of their minds relate broadly to quality of life, cost of living, opportunity, health and employment. Company tax cuts, small business and jobs is something that's top of mind for the government. We spoke a lot about jobs and growth in the economy at the last election, and jobs is certainly a big issue in my electorate. Small business is the backbone of our community. It generates job, injects diversity and opportunity into the electorate, and it fuels growth and prosperity for all. Locally, of course, I've been doing the Job Seeker Boot Camp, where I've been inviting small businesses, those that employ 5 or more people, to come along and meet with people looking for work to explain when they're hiring, what is it that they look for when hiring. And that's been quite successful, and I'll continue to do that. Company tax, of course, will provide welcome relief to business and workers and will boost the economy that creates jobs. It sends a strong signal to the small business and medium business community in particular that as a government we're supporting them and thanking them for employing the majority of Australians. As Jodie May Ladhebs from Bracken Ridge says to me, she says, show support to Australians who work their butts off and pay their taxes, stop our companies from going bust and make our small businesses profitable and successful. Make Australia great again, strong industry, strong community. Well, look, I agree, Jodie. I agree, and I urge all members to support the enterprise tax plan, a solid plan that will put money in the pockets of workers. Under the enterprise tax plan, the government will back small businesses by reducing their tax rate to 27.5% starting on July 1, 2017, this year, with those that turn over less than $10 million. The plan will deliver a lower tax rate for around 870,000 companies who employ more than 3.4 million workers, allowing them to invest, grow, hire and pay more. We're also doing a lot for small business in relation to the instant asset tax write-off, which I think is a great initiative and will definitely be highly utilised by businesses under 10 million. I think that'll be a great opportunity from 1st of July this year for businesses under 10 million, and it'll send a signal to them, a strong signal, that the government is supporting them, and we want them to invest more in more workers and more employees to help grow the economy and their business more. In relation to company tax, the weight of company tax is carried by consumers and workers. More than half of the economic burden of corporate tax weighs on employees through lower wages and on consumers through higher prices. Of course, we know that business passes on costs through higher prices. Research like that from the Tax Foundation in the US shows that for every $1 rise in state and local corporate tax collections, real wages fall by $2.50 5 years later. But thankfully, the reverse also applies, that wages increase by $2.50 with every $1 reduction in state and local corporate income taxes. As Bill Shorten said when he was Assistant Treasurer, cutting the company income tax rate leads to more jobs and higher wages. Cutting the company income tax rate leads to more jobs and higher wages, but we don't hear that quoted now from those opposite. More jobs and higher wages both are useful and necessary in order to get by. The OECD has said corporate income taxes are the most harmful for growth, as they discourage the very activities of businesses that are most important for growth, those being investment in capital and productivity improvements. As Dustin Hedigan from Northlake says, when are we going to wake up? Well, with the vote for the enterprise tax plan, I hope, Dustin, and I definitely appreciate that. Australia has one of the least competitive business tax rates in the world. Thankfully, this Parliament is about to be handed the opportunity to change that. Recalibrating company tax in favour of the prosperity of Australians involves more than just tax cuts, as Max Colquhoun from Scarborough rightly points out. Max says, get stuck into businesses that are avoiding tax, he told me. And Max, you are absolutely right, absolutely right. We have, of course, in December 2015 passed the multinational tax avoidance bill, which is currently in place, and we're already seeing income flow from that. But it's also down to time to crack down on multinational tax avoidance further. And Max, you'll be pleased to know that we plan to do that right now. In fact, legislation's been introduced. The diverted profits tax will put an extra $100 million in revenue into the government kitty next year alone. The diverted profits tax is a useful anti-avoidance provision which will impose a penalty tax on profits transferred to offshore associates. It will apply to multinational operations with global income greater than $1 billion that are making income in Australia of more than $25 million. It arms the Australian Tax Office with a powerful mechanism for tackling contrived arrangements and uncooperative taxpayers, and it provides the Commissioner of Taxation with extra powers to achieve this. By making it easier to apply Australia's anti-avoidance provisions and applying a 40% rate of tax payable immediately, the diverted profits tax will complement the application of the existing anti-avoidance rules. It will encourage greater compliance by large multinational enterprises with their tax obligations in Australia, including with Australia's transfer pricing rules, and encourage greater openness with the Commissioner, allowing for more timely resolution for disputes. Now, these two initiatives, Max, the DPT and the company tax cuts, demonstrate that this government's commitment to Australian businesses and workers, to creating jobs and repairing a budget Labor dragged backwards through a bush. By investing in fairness, we secure a brighter future for all, and that's what we all want, isn't it? We all want that. Fairness is a fair expectation, and the people of Peachtree want that. They have tightened their purse strings and have a fair expectation that we'll also do the same. They don't see the value, Madam Deputy Speaker, or necessity in MPs that have left Parliament flying free, and neither do I. It doesn't put food on their tables or mine. Just ask Chrissy Bonello from Scarborough in my electorate, or Gary Swanson from Kipparing, who have both raised this issue with me. Parliamentary expenditure entitlements, they say, must be reformed. In fact, Gary said, if you really care in making a change, I suggest you and the Liberals and the other parties all pass legislation to cease making payments and any other concessions that are paid to former Prime Ministers and former politicians, etc. That includes officers, travel, support staff, with all the cost to the Australian taxpayer. Well, Gary and Chrissy, you're absolutely right, and we have recently cracked down on that, where we got rid of the gold travel pass for former MPs that were unable to fly. That's now completely gone. It still does apply for former Prime Ministers, but I'd say to Gary and Chrissy that I think that's reasonable, because most former Prime Ministers still do work hard, whether it's Julia Gillard or Kevin Rudd or John Howard. They all still do have numerous contacts and represent the country. Maybe at some time in the future they could put a time frame on it, maybe up to 15 years or something after leaving office. The other thing that I'd say to Chrissy and also to Gary is that new MPs like myself and you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that were elected after 2004 no longer receive pensions. So when we leave Parliament, it doesn't matter how long we're here, we don't receive pensions. We get superannuation on top of our wage, like everyone else, and we have to wait till after the age of 55 before we can access that superannuation. And it's an important point, because you'll often get people say, oh, you get a pension, mate, you'll be right. Well, look, I don't want a pension, I don't expect one, and I don't get one. Having been in the private sector for all my life before coming into Parliament, it's not something that I support, and I think it's important to put on the record for my constituents in relation to that. In 2016, the Government commissioned an independent review into parliamentary entitlement system, and all 36 of the review's recommendations were accepted by this government, and we are continuing to implement them. With the recent passage of the Parliamentary Entitlements Legislation Bill 2017, the Coalition Government has abolished free travel, as I said before, for former parliamentarians, and this is very important. The authority that we are setting up will also act as a watchdog and advisor to provide oversight and certainty to Australians that their money is being spent appropriately. And I think that's important, given that we earn, right now, with the budget coming up in May, about $400 billion a year. That's how much we earn in income, $400 billion or so, from income tax, from those people that work, and from company tax, from all those companies that do the right thing. But right now we're spending, Madam Deputy Speaker, about $440 billion a year, and have done for the last 10 years since John Howard and Peter Costello left. So if you add that up, 40 billion times 10, it's roughly $400 billion in accumulated debt, plus interest that continues to grow and will be paid for by my children and the next generation. And that will continue to grow. And that's right, the member opposite interjects, and it has gone up. That's what I just said if he'd listened. Every year for the last 10 years, since Howard left, 40 billion a year times 10 is 400 billion. But the problem is, you're right, it has gone up, but members opposite don't seem to want to help us rein in that spending. And those in my electorate would know, that
Order.
those people in my electorate should know that the Prime Minister isn't in a position to just go, well, let's spend $395 billion this year. Let's reduce it by $5 billion. The Prime Minister can't do that. The only way we can reduce expenditure is to get the support of the Parliament through the Senate. And unfortunately, the Senate isn't enabling us to do that, and they continue to see them go up.
Order.
But look, that's an important note for the people of Petrie to know, and I'm certainly committed. I don't want to leave debt and deficit legacy to the next generation. And I spoke today to Joe and Marianne Strasbourg from Bracken Ridge, who made that important point to me. They said, Luke, we can't continue to let debt and deficit go up. And if the Senate doesn't support it, why not call another election now, they're sort of saying. Well, I said, well, look, we did call another election, but the Australian people still voted for a different Senate. But it's important for me to note, and as someone that was elected, someone that is elected, I continue to explain to the people that this is an important measure, that debt is continuing to go up, and we do need to address it, and I'll continue to highlight it. Joe and Marianne Strasbourg also spoke about free speech and said that 18C, the changes there were important. They criticised me and us for taking too long to do it, but I did explain, well, look, we have been listening and we are doing it, and I certainly believe in free speech. And I think it's a really good thing. And if people know me, and they know the Prime Minister and the people in Australia. We don't tolerate racism, and there's protection still there in place, as the Prime Minister said. We're strengthening that. So Joe and Marianne, thank you for your contribution as well in relation to that. Paul Weisennecker from Castledine shone a light onto a reform issue that had us all talking during the first sitting period about when senators leave their party, the spot should go back to the party. So if someone leaves the party, then that should go back. They shouldn't be able to sit in Parliament for another 6 years. Look, I agree with that. It has happened on both sides of Parliament. But look, I think that if you're elected under a party like I was, that you should stick with that party. And you'll find that most independents in this place, apart from the member for Mayo, I think, and the member for Indi, were all originally with a party and then switched to become independents, which I don't think is right, whether they're in the Senate or in the House. The other thing is Stella Burnell from Redcliffe, who calls on the government to fast-track the complete legalisation of medicinal cannabis for appropriate affordable treatment. Please push for the complete legalisation of medicinal cannabis. Many people are suffering, and this substance could alleviate their pain. It is frustrating to see how slowly this is happening. Well, Stella, thank you for contacting me. I have raised this directly with the Minister for Health, the Honourable Greg Hunt, and I'm pleased to see that fast, safe and easy access to medicinal cannabis is on this government's agenda. I voted for that change last year, Stella. It's new territory, of course, for Australia, and it offers hope for those with a wide range of health challenges. I congratulate the Minister's Office for listening to the people and moving swiftly to address concerns over difficulty accessing the product on scrip while domestic production becomes available. The controlled importation by approved providers from approved international sources offers interim supply and bridges a gap until domestic production can meet local needs. Like health, essential services are stretched to their limits, and we need to inject efficiency into the triangle of government responsibility. Alan Bell from Scarborough also echoed the sentiments of many when he spoke of the high cost of living and said he would like to see more done about lowering the daily living cost, which is killing low-income Australians, such as petrol, power, water, rent, fresh food and so forth. Where does it stop? Too right, Alan. The rising cost of living has reached crisis point for many people. This includes childcare reform to make childcare more affordable, more flexible and more accessible for families. Many families have contacted me, Madam Deputy Speaker, and hopefully we can have this sorted by 1st of July so we can encourage more women and more parents back into the workforce. Our package delivers the highest rate of assistance to those who need it most. I'd say to Alan too that power is a real issue. I was talking to the Golden Ox restaurant from Margate, who 5 years ago their electricity bill was $2,750 a month, and it's now $5,240 a month, almost a doubling in electricity. And that's why the Prime Minister's announcement in relation to a 50% expansion on the Snowy Hydro scheme and pumped hydro and other forms of renewable energy, as well as clean coal and gas, more gas for the domestic supply, is important because we need energy security. And if businesses' electricity costs are doubling, how are they going to employ more people? I also had a number of other people, Dawn Q from Rothwell, Terry Mead from Redcliffe, Brenda Wood from Scarborough, Trevor Johnson from Clontarf, Deborah Lee Andrews from Kippering, also talking about foreign ownership. And one of them mentioned about Cubby Station being sold off by the Chinese. And, you know, obviously that happened back in the former government when Wayne Swan signed off on that. But I would say that the Foreign Investment Review Board has been in place, and the government did stop the sale of the Kidman cattle station twice when it came before the FIRB because it was 100% Australian owned, and then when a new bid came through from Hancock Prospecting with 60% ownership and part Chinese, that was approved, so that FIRB was triggered. But I would say to people that farmers in general, while some farmers are struggling, there's others that are doing very well. We've had a big increase in exports in the last 12 months, from 46 billion in agriculture exports to 60 billion in agriculture exports. And of course, that's partly mainly because of our free trade agreements, and we can also invest in other countries. So I say to the people of Petrie and everyone that's contacted me, Thank you for your engagement. I'll continue to work hard, represent you well, and I look forward to leaving this place soon, Madam Deputy Speaker, and being back with my constituents. Thank you.
I thank the member for Petrie. The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the member for Fenner.